Hello and welcome to the show that debates and deconstructs burning issues of the day. This is The Big Picture and I'm Athar Khan. The emotional scarring that took place in Godhra and the post-Godhra riots has never really gone away from the public mind space, even after 10 years of the incidents. What happened in the days and months after a railway coach was burnt near Godhra railway station in 2002 was perhaps the most horrific example of religious violence in India since independence. 58 Hindu activists were killed on the 27th of February 2002. This led to the eruption of violence across Gujarat, in which hundreds of Muslims were killed and property worth billions of rupees was destroyed. The Prime Minister of the country at that time, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, called the events a national shame and promised justice for the victims on both sides. 10 years hence, has India given justice to its people? What is the balance sheet now? A large number of victims have lost hope, while others continue with what is surely a long judicial battle. While it remains in power in Gandhinagar, the Bharatiya Janata Party's quest to form a government in New Delhi remains, as of now, a distant dream. Gujarat's controversial Chief Minister Narendra Modi's popularity, if electoral victories are the yardstick of that phenomena, remains high in his state, but across India, he is still quite radioactive. Coalition partners of the BJP are averse to be seen with him, let alone allow him to campaign in their states. Various SIT reports and court judgments have also not helped him shed the rabid right-winger image outside of Gujarat. Tonight on The Big Picture, we try to gauge what we have learned as a nation, as Indians. We also try and get a sense of where it has led the main political players in the country and how it has shaped our polity post-2002. Most importantly, we will try and discuss the situation in the country now. Have we seen the end of communal violence in the country? And to help me navigate this delicate and sensitive issue, joining me in the studio is Mridula Mukherjee from JNU. Also joining me is Verghese George, Chief of Bureau with the Hindustan Times. Joining us on the program will also be Mark Tully, senior journalist and author. But I'd like to start the show with Mr. Tully, if I could. Mark Tully, 10 years later in Gujarat, the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, held prayer meetings and took out rallies in and around Godhra, while relatives of the victims of the consequent communal riots gathered at the Gulberg Society here and marked a decade of that gory incident. Has anything really changed in Gujarat 10 years hence?
Well, it's very difficult to tell because, of course, I haven't been to Gujarat that often during the last 10 years. But I think the one thing which has not happened and which is sad is there has been no real attempt at reconciliation. Nothing like the Truth and Reconciliation, for instance, which happened in South Africa. Everything has been left to politics and to the courts. And neither of those neither politicians nor judges and courts and the legal system are really sufficient to heal wounds.
Right. Stay with us, Mr. Tully. We'll come to the studio guest as well. Mridula Mukherjee, if I could ask you heard what Mark had to say. Has really anything changed in Gujarat? Also give us a sense, and our viewers a sense, of how really the man on the street views Gujarat and how it shaped our polity after the incidents happened.
I think it's had a very fundamental effect on the whole political scene in India. One, I think Gujarat, what happened in Gujarat alerted us to the ever-present danger with which we are living. That if we do not continue to try and push back and defeat this ogre of communalism, at the heart of which lies a mindset where we think of each other in terms of our identities as communities rather than as human beings or as Indians or whatever else it might be, that we think of as a primary identity. These kinds of things can happen again and again. It takes some gory incident like that of Godhra to enable those who are interested in such things happening, promoting such kind of politics, promoting such kind of incidents on the basis of which they then built their politics, like the BJP. So that's something that has warned us not to be sanguine, that we have managed to conquer this problem, because if in one part of India something like this could happen, it can happen otherwise. The other thing that it showed us was that this unholy alliance between the state power and a communal ideology is something that's very dangerous, because the Gujarat situation was one where the government of the day was interested in promoting the hatred, promoting the reaction, turning a blind eye to the violence as it was being organized. And actually, the government may not itself, but the party that ran the government and its associated organizations were deeply involved in what happened on the street.
Right, right.
So there are many, many very significant lessons that we have learned from what happened in Gujarat those days. And I would say that today it's a mixed story. On the one hand, I see the strength of Indian democracy in the critiques that have come. That Modi, nobody wants Modi to come and campaign for them, is the victory of secularism. But that he's still there.
But the argument would be it's not just a victory for secularism, it's also electoral politics.
No, but electoral politics where somebody like Modi doesn't do you any good means that at the ground level, people don't want Modi. I think that is the strength of our system.
Let me come to Verghese George quickly and ask you this. Has Gujarat, and really the people of Gujarat, do you think they've really moved on since Godhra and post-Godhra? It's been 10 years, especially since no one of significance who's been alleged to have a role in it is behind bars or convicted for that matter. Do you think Gujarat has really moved on like the government of the day there would like to believe?
Well, if you go by the accounts of the Gujarat state government, and many people who are aligned with it, Gujarat has moved on, and there is a conscious effort ever since 2002 riots to deflect the attention and to bring about a narrative about how developed the Gujarat state has become, how the vibrant Gujarat campaigns, which has been a regular recurring feature of the state government. So there is a conscious effort to throw statistics at you about the economic development of the state, how foreign investors and domestic investors are interested in the state, so on and so forth. So in that sense, that is a narrative that the people who are responsible or who are complicit, or at least people who turned their eyes the other way when it was all happening, have created. As far as the victims are concerned, I don't think they could move with their life ahead because justice has not been delivered. People, as you rightly pointed out, people who have been responsible for this kind of unprecedented, horrific violence, they're still out. And many of them still do enjoy the power and they are promoted or protected by the state government.
Right.
So to say that Gujarat has moved ahead is actually missing the point that justice has not been done.
Absolutely. Mridula Mukherjee, there is this feeling that there is a growing chasm and there are two Gujarats inside Gujarat. Now, there is one Gujarat which is aspirational and say upwardly mobile. The other is increasingly getting alienated. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's a fair assessment of the situation?
No, I don't think so. You know, I think I don't agree with these kind of generalizations where the entire sort of Hindu, Gujarati, particularly the middle and the upper classes are painted with the communal brush as if everybody has become communal. No, I don't think so. Then it would be in many ways a lost battle. Then we should be asking for all the Muslims of Gujarat to be repatriated outside Gujarat because you can't permanently live in a hostile situation. My reading is different. When there is somebody in power, most people tend to go along because their ordinary lives have to run, they have to do their businesses, they have to earn their living. That doesn't mean that everybody is dehumanized to the extent that they don't care about what's going on. So I don't see it like that. I don't think that Gandhi is dead in Gujarat or the secular tradition of humanism or the Jain tradition, even the religious traditions of Gujarat are dead to the extent that people are not human, don't care about humanity anymore. I think that would be a very dismal. But I would like to say that, yesterday Justice Hospet Suresh has made a statement at the Gulberg Society Memorial, which I think is also answers to some extent what Mark Tully said. He said truth and reconciliation hasn't happened, but he said reconciliation can only happen once truth is admitted. Let's not forget that first the guilty have to admit what they did. So Modi has to admit that he sat there and said, let the violence happen. Those who actually went out and organized have to say, this was our guilt. Then only the question of forgiveness and reconciliation comes.
Fair point.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is not about saying, let the criminals go scot-free without even admitting their guilt. And let me quote you Gandhiji on this. In Noakhali, when Gandhiji had gone in 1946-47 at the height of the communal disturbances, he took a very firm stand and said that the guilty must be punished, because without that there can be no justice.
Right, fair point, fair point. I'll interrupt you there. We'll come back after a short break. There's lots more to discuss on this issue. We are just getting started on the lessons learned from Gujarat and Godhra. We'll be right back in no time. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture, and we're still discussing Gujarat, Godhra, and the aftermath. Now, coming back to Mark Tully, if you're still with us, Mark, there is a general sense around the country, not just in some sections, a large section of the society and our polity believes that justice has not only been delayed, it has been denied. Do you agree with that?
Well, to some extent, obviously, this is so. In legal terms, this is so to some extent. But the point I'm trying to make is that justice alone is not enough. This is what is never realized in this country. There is a need for reconciliation, for the confession, for the admission of faults which have been done, instead of trying to fight each other in the courts. Because when people try to fight each other in the courts, they try to hide what they have done.
Coming back to that invariably links to what you said. The guilty, I mean, people who are alleged to be involved haven't really, they're not even apologetic about what happened. And Varghese George, would you agree that that is a really disturbing trend in the country?
But forget about the guilty admitting to their guilt or the accused admitting to their guilt. The very concerted effort that the state government has made to sabotage these cases. Yeah. When as late as last week, you have had a case in which the Supreme Court of India has said the cases that the state government mounted against people who are campaigning for justice are 100% spurious. The highest court of this land had to intervene and say that thing. So far from justice, any pursuit for justice from the part of the state government, it has gone out of its way to sabotage justice and to come in the way of fair trial, and the court, Supreme Court and the Gujarat High Court itself had to intervene numerous times in the last 1 decade. And still, the sad part is that the only one case in Gujarat has led to a conviction where people are in jail. And 2 other cases in which the Gujarat prosecution was so hurriedly packed up the cases, the Sahira Sheikh case and the Bilkis Banu case, which were transferred out of the state on orders of the Supreme Court, which led to conviction in Maharashtra. So except these 2 or 3 cases, there has been no conviction, or the many people who are involved in the riots are still MLAs of the BJP. They are still around and they are enjoying fruits of power.
Right.
So there is not been any serious efforts to truth or justice. Yes.
Make your point, then I have a question for you.
Nice. I wanted to bring in also the role of the bureaucracy over here. You know, barring a few very valiant officers like Bhatt and Sri Kumar and a few others, I mean, in giving the evidence before the commissions and the SIT, they're all suffering from amnesia. Nobody can remember what happened in that meeting. Nobody can remember what they did. They say, oh, it's too far away, it's too far back. I mean, you don't start reconciliation with this kind of an attitude. It's because they think they can go scot-free, they have the backing of the government, that this kind of thing is happening. Otherwise, how is it possible that all the senior officers are suddenly suffering from severe cases of amnesia?
Selective amnesia.
Selective amnesia. You know, I'm sure they all remember when they got their last promotion and when they're due for the next one. I'm sorry to be a little rude, but
that's fine. That's fine. Coming back to a point you made where you said that you don't really agree that Gujarati Hindus or Gujarati Muslims think differently, whatever. Rajdeep Sardesai, India's most respected journalist, writes in his blog, and I'll quote him, there is a definite optimism in the air in Ahmedabad, and yet step away from the bright lights into Godra's Signal Falia Basti, where most of the accused in the train burning incident lived. The young tell me they are jobless because no one will give them employment. No one will give employment to Muslim youth with Signal Falia as the address. He continues to say that Citizen Nagar, a resettlement colony for riot victims on the outskirts of Ahmedabad, the residents live near the city's biggest garbage dump. Gujarat isn't vibrant here. Wouldn't that slightly, coming back to my point, saying there's a chasm?
That kind of divide we have in every city in India. It's between the rich and the poor. the well-to-do and the upwardly mobile. It's not a Hindu-Muslim divide. Here we are, pitching like a block of Muslims who are very poor against the well-to-do Hindu middle class. I'm saying that divide is there everywhere in India. I mean, we don't have to talk about it. That's a different issue and a different problem, a very serious one.
True.
What I'm trying to say is that if we were to even accept the proposition that there is a unbridgeable divide between Hindus and Muslims in Gujarat, then what is the answer? Then the answer is the same as partition in 1947. But that's not something we can even start with talking about. I'm saying there is a peculiar situation in Gujarat where the people in power are pushing for a certain kind of divide. And therefore, at the level of the people also, there's much more of it that comes out than actually may be if people were in a normal situation.
Right.
There are Gujaratis outside Gujarat. Absolutely. They live in Delhi. Absolutely. Are they all communalized? No. I mean, let's just look at it with a little bit of,
let's shift focus. I think we've been talking. Let's talk about Narendra Modi, the man himself. Now, Narendra Modi is stuck with the taint of Gujarat because Gujarat essentially was the first really riot that happened under 24/7 media glare. Yeah. There were riots before that. There were riots in Mumbai, Surat, Bhagalpur, Hyderabad, Moradabad, Bhiwandi, even in Ahmedabad. But they were obviously just figures because 24/7 news channels weren't around. Now, do you think the constant media glare has sort of discouraged similar events happening, maybe even lessened to the fact, to some extent, similar events happening across the country? Verghese, George, first you and then Mridula.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is also related to the earlier question that you raised, how India's politics has changed post-2002. Because post-2000, if you look at India's politics prior to that thing, there has been a very studied ambiguity among many other parties vis-a-vis communal politics of both kinds. So 2002 was a landmark in that sense, that political parties could not afford to be ambiguous as many of them used to be in their earlier coalitions. I mean, you have had experiences of left and the BJP being alliance, socialist, people who have now opposed to Nitish Kumar being being a campaigner in their state, also being part of the same spectrum at various stages. So 2002 brought a very stark and sharp choice before Indian electorates in general and India's political class in particular, which was, what is the kind of India that you have in mind, that you envision? Are you, as ma'am pointed out, are we still open to the idea of another partition, or are we open to another discourse where you have a Hindu theocracy in this country? This is a fundamental fault line in Indian politics. So you have to be making a choice on these lines first before you get into various other multitudes of political issues involved there. So in that sense, 2002 marked this thing. So after that, I would say, broadly speaking, Indian politics has been a bipolar politics.
Right.
Whether, which side of the divide are you on this question?
Right.
That said, 2002, in that sense, has been a big learning lesson, a big lesson for India, and I think we've learned that lesson at least.
We'll talk about that a little bit more after the break. We have lots more coming up. We'll go to Mark Tully and ask him some really pointed questions after the break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Back, you're still with the big picture. Mark Tully, if I could ask you this, Narendra Modi has a very effective and impressive record as a development-minded chief minister. Now, has the ghost of Godhra and Gujarat denied India, in your opinion, a potentially effective prime minister or prime minister candidate, I could say? Has the ghost of Gujarat done that to India?
Well, I would certainly say that he has not been able to shake that tarnished image, and I think that is in some ways his own fault, because he has never properly owned responsibility, nor has he apologized properly for what happened.
Right.
So I think that is his own fault. And whether India has lost an effective potential prime minister, well, I think that, yes, he has shown great effectiveness as a chief minister, but we must not forget that Gujarat has a long record of effective development. I remember back some years ago when I was in the time of Indira Gandhi, in fact, when I was asked to make a program which would show what India was achieving, because India was getting such a bad image in the international press. And I chose to go to the state of Gujarat, and that must be back in about 1983 or something like that.
Right, right. Mark, stay with us. I'll come back to you first, if possible. Mridula Mukherjee, do you believe that this sort of aggressive, I think cultural nationalism is what the BJP likes to call it, is something that can deliver political dividends to the BJP, considering the youth of the country want economic development? Shouldn't they be focusing on, say, aggressive economic populism than rather than cultural nationalism to get what they want, which is Delhi?
But then you're forgetting the raison d'etre of the BJP. You're asking them to become a normal, non-communal, right-wing party. I mean, that has been a line that's been tried to be sold by some people in the BJP that, you know, especially when Vajpayee was on top, that it was getting transformed, it was coming out of the stronghold of the RSS and was, you know, like a regular right-wing party which was going to talk about globalization. But then it's a very confused party on the economic front also. They had a Swadeshi Jagran Manch and they had liberalization. So, I mean, forget that. The economic policies have also been very mixed up in terms of the ideology. But then the BJP is not the BJP. You know, this is a 100-year-old history. There's the Hindu Mahasabha, which got abolished because Savarkar got implicated in the murder of Mahatma Gandhi. Then there's the Jan Sangh, which got merged into the Janata Party. Then was born the BJP. So it's based on an ideology. It's like asking the tiger or the leopard to change its spots. Then there's no rationale for them to exist. These are highly ideological people. That's something that you can certainly say for them, you know. And what they're doing is for a cause that they believe in. So it's like, you know, I mean, this is not something, you know, that can happen. And as for the development part, let me just say that, you know, surely with our knowledge of history, I mean, you know, don't we remember Hitler? I'm sure Mark Tully could not have answered your question in the, because, I mean, he knows his history. Hitler did more development, you know, and so have all fascists. Even during the emergency, the story was the same, trains are running on time. But then these are not trade-offs, you know, you don't trade off economic development for basic human what shall I say, basic values,
you can't,
where people have a right to live.
Right. You can't keep the same level for, say, peace and communal harmony and say, okay, we're doing development. Fair point, fair point. Have you seen the end of communal violence in the country? I know the simple answer is, no, we haven't. It's not that simple. But is there a general feeling among the population, among our polity, among our politicians, that mob violence doesn't really do anything? It leads to mindless bloodshed, and that is it. Is there a general feeling? Have you learned that from Godhra at least?
Well, I don't know whether we have imbibed that as a social or cultural or political value. I would say a riot at the scale of Gujarat, what we saw in Gujarat, would be not practical to happen in this country. But at the same time, substantially disagreeing with ma'am on an earlier point, I fear, and sadly so, that India is nurturing, Indian public in general are nurturing more prejudice, more bias against its minorities than they were in 2002.
Would you agree with that?
I hope not. I hope you're wrong.
There is a slight...
all of us have failed continually to try and push it back.
Right.
Difficult to admit such total failure.
Absolutely. But let me ask you another question. How important is it for us as Indians and us as citizens of this country, not just us, everyone, politicians, the common classes, everyone, to eliminate, to sideline, to marginalize the lunatic fringe on both sides of any community? How important is it for us as a nation?
Very important. And we have to start not just with looking at the lunatic fringe. The lunatic fringe emerges out of very deep and old things like your textbooks. That's why we continue to battle the whole issue of how our history is written. If it is once you grow up as a child learning about Muslim atrocities on Hindus in the medieval period, naturally when you grow up and you listen to BJP stories, you are going to believe it, or vice versa. If you think, like in Pakistan, they teach the children, you know, that Hindus oppressed the Muslims from word go and whatnot, then you're going to grow up thinking that, you know, this is the kind of relationship that we've had in the past. So it's a completely distorted version of history. It's like the Jews. It's like anti-Semitism didn't happen overnight. It was deeply embedded in the literature and the stories.
But Verghese George, what is the way out? This has to be the last word on the show. Where do we go from here? The problems that Mridula just pointed out, they are deep-rooted, like she said. But where does India go from here towards a better future?
Well, I think, as she rightly pointed out, the areas of intervention will have to be education, both at formal and informal levels. And because I think the more prosperous that we become, sadly, again, I am not a big optimist as far as we being more secular. So I think that conscious efforts will have to be made. We cannot actually sit back and say, okay, since we are growing, so since we're growing economically, things will all vanish.
Because fair point. We must end this show. We are running out of time. Like my panelists and our guest Mark Tully said, it is not just about justice getting delayed or denied. It is about human beings, and it is about human capital that is suffering in the country. It is not about communities. Thank you so much, all my guests. I must thank Mark Tully, Verghese George, and Mridula Mukherjee for joining us today. Till we come back again with another episode of The Big Picture. Thank you and goodbye.